Hi there. I'm going to keep this short because I want everyone focused on the main point of it, which is that the news media has been very irresponsible with how they have been covering the Game of Thrones franchise, both with giving Benioff and Weiss a free pass and now abandoning it for House of the Dragon because of that, even though there's new people. They're not covering it at all. They are not investigating what happened behind the scenes with Game of Thrones. Point is, back at the beginning of the year, IMDb put out a list of the most anticipated new shows of 2022. And this isn't, a subjective critics list. This is based on the amount of site traffic at Internet Movie Database. What are people most interested in? It's a pretty objective measurement. And at the time, everyone was really surprised that House of the Dragon was top of the list. It was ahead of The Lord of the Rings Second Age prequel show, which people got wary about since they put out the first teaser. That was at the Super Bowl. That was months later. At the time, there was massive hype for the Lord of the Rings thing. For Neil Gaiman's Sandman adaptation at Netflix, they beat that too. It was number 4. Star Wars projects like Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Marvel projects rounding out the top 10. The other things were Lord of the Rings, Sandman, and superhero things, and Star Wars things from Marvel, like also Miss Marvel, Moon Knight. Kenobi was the big one. So everyone was stunned, and even George R. R. Martin put out a blog post of, wow, our show is more anticipated than big, major Hugo Award-winning fantasy series like Sandman or even Lord of the Rings. People are really interested in this. The phenomenon I want to talk about is how all of the news sites reporting on this seemed annoyed and surprised that this was happening, that they were, what, the fans are really interested in this? That on a grassroots level, you can see that people are searching for House of the Dragon news. It's that the small subfraction of people who are that recapper culture, the shallow TV hype reporters, are not doing their job and actually reporting on things as journalists. And why is that happening? That they don't feel like it's a show that's worth talking about, and they're telling us what we want. That's really what their problem is. More than the rest of us, that type of hype reporter, the within 2 hours after the episode airs recapper, they like making entertaining theories. Doesn't matter if they're, we're trying to figure out what is most likely. Like, if you're thinking about, well, who is Jon Snow's mother? Well, it's either Lyanna Stark or maybe Ashara Dane. That's kind of mundane. That they'd come up with something like it's a time-traveling Daenerys or aliens or something, because that is entertaining rather than what you could actually expect. And there were no repercussions when that type of thing is happening. So a major point of my channel is the free pass that the news media gave to Benioff and Weiss. Part of this is complaining about access journalism with Hibbert and Entertainment Weekly, with other people, but that I expect that. That doesn't even bother me that much. Yeah, there's going to be some people. There's at least 50 news sites covering this show, and people who never met or interacted with cast and crew, and who never were in a position to be bribed with access with interviews. Nonetheless, the hype reporter sites, the clickbait things, they were just believing the theories they wanted to believe, and then acted genuinely surprised when Season 8 didn't follow through on anything. You could have seen since Season 5 the show had gone off the rails once they left the books, that even as a TV show it didn't make sense. I keep saying this, they're not playing the same game that we are. To them, the meta-level game experience of this as entertainment is the making fan theories thing. And I think we inherited this recapper culture from all the way back to the late 2000s with late Lost, going into Breaking Bad, people who just wrote recaps like that, and it's who can make the most entertaining theories rather than the most accurate ones that are researched as journalism. Basically, they hired up people who are fanboys themselves. And they're not objective distance journalists. There's two sides to that coin, is my point. The first half was, during the actual run of Game of Thrones, they were unwilling to criticize Benioff and Weiss. They'd make excuses for them. More than the book fan sites ever did. More than, I was making excuses when I was in shock in Season 5 itself for about a year, because I kept going, maybe they're going somewhere with this. Even Westeros.org, when the Sansa rape happened, they said, this is so crazy, this can't be, let's see where they're going with this. No one would be crazy enough to do this at face value. Turns out they were. But all of us, by the end of Season 5, by Season 6, we stopped making excuses. The hype reporters just kept doing that until it was like, no, they didn't kill off Littlefinger. That was a faceless man. But then to imitate Littlefinger, he'd need to take Littlefinger's face. What are you talking about? All of that stuff. The two sides of that coin are just, when you're fanboying out about something like Star Wars or Star Trek, any other major franchise, and it suddenly disappoints you. Up until that point of realization, you're making excuses for it, it can do no wrong. But then when they do something really stupid that shocks you out of that, what do fanboys do? They go to the other opposite extreme and start essentially pouting, going, this is the most terrible thing ever, this guy is a monster, everything they touch is terrible, and I have a nuanced reaction to Rian Johnson didn't do some things I liked with Last Jedi, but, it's not he's 100% bad, it's, he didn't do enough for Finn, but Kylo was well done, but it's not, this person is out to harm you, And the problem when you have people fanboying out like that is they don't do actual research, as a journalist would, which in the grand scheme of things is actually a more productive way of taking them down. That, okay, this is behind the scenes what happened. That if you're angry with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, you don't go, Rian Johnson is the devil. You go, here are researched interviews pointing out step by step how Disney didn't actually plan out in advance who Rey's parents are. That does more damage. It is more constructive from a point of practicality. We didn't get that. We had hype reporters masquerade. They are literally social media influencers. It reminds me so much of the Fire Festival documentary of, we are using social media influencers to try to affect the public perception of this. A lot of these reporters are social media influencers from their Twitter reporters who got hired up to write entertaining quick recaps and fan theories rather than trying to dissect it. So when you faced a real crisis, I compare this to the Snyder Cut for Justice League, these are not the people who would research, these are things the executives and Whedon were really saying behind the scenes. We have evidence of this, cited interviews. That is a complex task that takes more than they're the devil, So the two sides of the coin of we have fanboys in charge who are not actual journalists, they're just social media influencers masquerading as that, is they would not make researched criticism of Benioff and Weiss during the run of the show, and as soon as Season 8 the final season let them down so hard. It is fascinating watching the reaction of people who reviewers who walked into Season 8 expecting something great, that it was just this whole moment of does not compute. They could not comprehend what they were seeing. And I can't even comprehend what it must have been like for them. Because, I figured out, oh God, they're making it up as they go along and they're showing off the actors by Season 6. By Season 5, I knew something was terribly wrong. Imagine what it was like, particularly because there was that gap year in 2018. These are people who are in love with the show from before 2013, assuming they were a late adopter when it got big, through 2019, that someone who really for 5 to 8 years wholeheartedly believed in Benioff and Weiss, whereas I'd thought they were okay for like 4 years. They were in the cult deeper than us for a lot longer. So when the shock came, granted, at least they hate them now, but instead of just hating Benioff and Weiss, they aren't making a measured criticism to the point that, and this is focus of this video, they blame Game of Thrones as a franchise, rather than being willing to admit that this was the fault of Benioff and Weiss. Much less that, yeah, as the news media, we let them get away with it. We gave them a free pass. All of this is stuff they were talking about in videos for years of we don't know what we're doing. It was encouraging, like after the Austin Film Fest panel, when like Forbes and Esquire were actually, the scales fell from their eyes and they were saying, these guys never knew what they were doing. They fooled us. But for all the other ones, even though we, the fans, are interested in House of the Dragon as the Dance of the Dragons show, which will be the rebirth of this franchise under new leadership, they just go, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. I have this image of them putting their hands over their ears. Or how many times in the past 3 years, tell me in the comments, have you heard an article by one of these people essentially pouting, just saying, no one talks about Game of Thrones anymore? You are a news reporter. Maybe not in a big news site, but you are the person who would be leading and generating discussion about this. By all means, give me an article about what you thought of how the story arcs do or do not make sense. They don't. In this show. Because they went all over the place, that it was so incoherent, so does not compute, that they just... Who would sit down and actually try to argue that Season 8 makes sense? Though bizarrely, and I've said this before, I actually have more respect for the people who bizarrely argue that Season 8 made sense than the people who just go, I don't want to talk about it, I'm pouting. Because that isn't like an emotionally mature response. You're acting like a child, you're a fanboy, rather than a detached, objective reporter. In many ways, I think that's drinking the Kool-Aid even more. It's worse than the people who were, Season 8 was amazing, everything made sense, Bran being king, how dare you say different. At least they're saying something. That mental image of them curling up in a ball and going, I don't want to talk about it. It's as if like a teacher in front of a classroom was doing that. And it's, you are the teacher. You are the news reporter who is supposed to be talking about this. And the utter abdication of moral responsibility and therefore abdication of authority, that they're linked. It's they wouldn't research, why did the Sansa rape happen? Why is Dorne so racist? Why did they butcher Stannis? And when it all finally blew up, they were so selfish, and this is them having an online party, like virtually through Twitter with the other recappers. It's this tiny subculture within a subculture of people making recaps and fan theories. The specific people do, like Joanna Robinson, I'm really annoyed at for leading this kind of thing. Even though she does book stuff too, it's... Reason I'm making this video now is, first, I meant to do this at New Year's, then I had death in the family, I had to stop what I was doing, and then by then it was too late. But it's still as relevant as ever that at the time when this list came out at New Year's, the people running the news sites essentially scoffed at it. Mainstream news sites, the scoffed, why is House of the Dragon on here? The Game of Thrones prequel? We don't talk about that anymore. In many ways, I sympathize with the people who, in a bizarre, mirrored way, who liked Season 8. There's a hardcore fan base on Reddit who's small but very dedicated, saying it was amazing. Like, you can't argue we're not talking about this anymore. Both groups, either the pro-Season 8 groups or the very anti ones of why aren't you complaining about it more? We want to discuss this one way or another. Versus just shutting down and saying, I don't want to talk about it. That is deeply irresponsible. So what brought it up now, halfway through the year, this is July 4th weekend, is when news of the Jon Snow prequel came out, the Jon Snow sequel came out. Oh God, I'm so used to saying prequel instead of sequel that some of us responded with mockery and then with like why create, and Red Team Review Preston Jacobs are just mocking it, but then came down to, okay, realistically, what story might George R. R. Martin be on board with for this if he approved it? What could they say? Not making up an entertaining thing, but realistically, what could they be doing? Like Smokescreen was trying to make a video like that. Now, I made one saying, Martin really likes, the first thing he ever adapted for television was Zelazny's The Last Defender of Camelot. So maybe, because Jon is a fire white, he's technically immortal, maybe this will be like a distant finale epilogue set 1,000 years later with Jon Snow as this immortal wanderer mourning the loss of magic in the world in the bygone age. That's like a rational theory. Now, that could be wrong. It could be something else. It could be just Jon with Tormund, not with a time jump, dealing with his grief over what happened. It might even be a story with the wildlings. Versus, I was really offended by Joanna Robinson's reaction, which I know she meant as a joke in her podcast, where it was just a 15-minute goofing off. He wasn't taking it seriously. But as opposed to mocking it, it was, oh yeah, and they'll bring Ghost back, he's my boy. Well, who doesn't like Ghost? And they'll put in all this other stuff, and Arya will be back. And they didn't describe this as season 9. This isn't going to be, and we're going to get Daenerys back, and then what? This won't fix, it won't be a season 9. That, okay, once the shock wore off, some people were trying to go, realistically, what could they be doing? And you could see that old fandom, the old sub-fraction of the fandom, who aren't playing the game we are, who think of these as fictional, coherent characters, or they should be, the people who came for the theorization, that the entertaining theories are the point. Like that phrase, the cruelty is the point. The entertaining theories are the crack theories, to borrow the term from TV tropes. That is the point. They're making entertaining wish list theories. If you actually sat them down, I don't know if they'd actually have a TV show when they give off one of those wish lists of, are you being serious now? How would such a show exist? Not just for this, but for other shows when someone's just giving off wacky theories. So I am upset that in the past 2 weeks, we have seen, more than 2 weeks, we have seen that out of touch subfraction of, I shouldn't call them news media because they're not journalists, they're social media influencers who've been hired as hype reporters. They were more interested in the Jon Snow sequel than they ever were House of the Dragon, which has been in development for 2 years, which a lot of fans, not just me, but on the subreddit, have been diligently going through spy photos and set reports and writing up, well, this is what Aemond is like, this is what Helena is like, and trying to get a gauge for that. And who is Rhaenyra, the real person behind the lines of all the rival historians? It is shameful just how much they are more focused on, oh my god, Jon Snow is a sequel. And granted, yes, that should have attention on it, don't get me wrong, and yes, they should have talked about it for a week or so, but for lack of a better term, you could see the light coming on in their eyes, as it were, even though this is text, of, oh my god, Jon Snow, and it's as if it was a flashback to 3 years ago. That instead of, this is who Rhaenyra is, this is what the Great Council was, this is how their inheritance system works, was Alicent really a bad person or not? Well, it depends on how you interpret it. It turned back into wacky, entertaining theories. And it really highlighted for me that difference, that these hype reporters are not interested in House of the Dragon. We need our own news sites. And to a lesser extent, the quizzlings at Watchers on the Wall, granted, no, they really, for 3 years, they've barely talked about the show, because there's nothing to say that wouldn't be embarrassing. And occasionally, they would repeat things from the subreddit that had already gone through other mainstream news sites, like there was a spy photo spread in a newspaper in Britain already, but it wasn't like breaking news. And then it was that point where for 5 months, Watchers on the Wall didn't update anything. When the rest of us, we were making like casting reports and stuff. It was outdoor filming had stopped, but there was still casting news and interviews to report on. I was reporting on things between February and March that the old guard people are not interested in this prequel era. The mainstream hype people on clickbait sites, even like the Watchers on the Wall crowd, they are here for the celebrity actors that they started watching with on Game of Thrones. Yes, we can reasonably expect some interest in, Jon Snow is this really important established character, as much as we reported on it, but it's their level of enthusiasm for it was shameful. That, tell me in the comments, guys, I know this is a rant, but just how much they are more interested in one sentence. Kit Harington wants a Jon Snow sequel, and they're developing it and have been for a year and a half, rather than the entire book Fire and Blood, all of this context for dozens of major characters, 2 years worth of filming reports and spy photos, cast and crew interviews. They don't care. This was officially under their radar. And the fact that IMDb put this out shows the divide. It's not just my opinion that there is a grassroots level of support for this as an ongoing franchise in different prequel eras. People are interested in House of the Dragon. They ignored it. It was officially under their radar until Jon Snow sequel. How many times I'm terrified that at Comic-Con, if they ever do Q&A, but like at other interviews when they do Q&A, I think it's a question of when, not if, someone asks, like, a House of the Dragon cast member, hey, what do you think of the Jon Snow sequel? What have you heard of it? Like, maybe you would ask Ryan Condal about that in the sense of you're a writer, what have you heard? It's another project in this franchise, but I have this mental image of Emma Darcy does their first big public interview, and the first question they give them is, hey, have you heard of the Jon Snow sequel? As opposed to, so, what's it like playing Rhaenyra? I mean, literally the first question. I am terrified that it's not that it'll overshadow it, because to us, to the majority of fans, to statistically IMDb showed, most people are interested in House of the Dragon, more than these other shows, more than Sandman, more than Lord of the Rings. That entrenched group of hype reporters that it's just Game of Thrones, it's just the core 7 cast members from that, it's the celebrity cult around Kit Harington, Maisie Williams, the other core cast. That is very different from the actual story, which was disintegrating in the later seasons. But to them, that's all there is. So, what is the most anticipated show now? Tell me in the comments. Not of 2022, obviously, because it'll take time to make a Jon Snow show, but which is more anticipated? House of the Dragon or the Jon Snow show? Because the Jon Snow one seems to be the only one these people really want to report on. These social media influencers masquerading as journalists. I have had enough. Their time has passed. I'm not talking about one person. Would that I was talking about one or two people. It's at every news site. It is a widespread problem that the people generally in charge of reporting on this, and there's no bribery, no one's forcing, these aren't even like the specific people like Hibbard who I said that they want favors, so they give them softball questions. Just the people who want to believe in it, who are doing this purely because they are entertained by the hype. No one is making them do this. They are more interested in this isn't a story, this is Kit Harington striking a pose in a Jon Snow costume, which is basically what seasons 5 through 8 were. That's all it is to them, and when you try to point out this isn't a coherent story, they don't care. It was never about Westeros, because these are people who don't care about it in any prequel era. They are here for those specific celebrity actors. I mean, what if they said, well, it's going to be Jon Snow, but he's going to look like an old man because 1,000 years have passed, so he'll be played by someone else. Granted, we know Kit Harington is in it, but or imagine if it was an animated project that Kit Harington wasn't personally involved with, but like Benioff and Weiss were. No, it is specifically John Kit, specifically Maisie Arya, and the theory games they're playing. This is what they anticipate more than all of the rest of us, the majority of us, who anticipate we don't care about this Jon Snow thing. I mean, we care more about House of the Dragon. Maybe we'll care more about the Jon Snow thing when we know more about it. But at the moment, the response has been at best trepidation. So I don't know what's going to happen, and I fear for... It'll be interesting to revisit this video in 2 months and see if someone asks the first and only question they ask, not even a writer, but a cast member on House of the Dragon is, so what do you think of the Jon Snow sequel? And keep asking, so what about Jon Snow's mother, long after that question has been, answered. So, this is longer than I wanted to be. I'm sorry, it's 27 minutes or so, but just looking at the contrast between that of at New Year's when this thing came out and they said actually people are really looking forward to House of the Dragon, the most anticipated new show ahead of all these other things, it was mocked by the very people who are supposed to be reporting on this. The people who the past 3 years I had thought would be doing the kind of investigative research which I am attempting to do going through DVD commentaries and interview books. Slowly, because I'm not a professional. Neither are they. They're never going to do that. They are fanboys who were hired up from social media. They're influencers, which means they wouldn't criticize it before the end. And now that everyone acknowledges it's bad, I don't want to talk about it, I'm pouting it emotionally rather than do your job. They are supposed to be reporting at House of the Dragon. Even if you're interested in the Jon Snow show, I think it was okay, we took 2 weeks to report on it. I took time to report on it as much as I could. But until we know more about it, there isn't much more to say. You need to switch back to talking about House of the Dragon. And so far, at least, I haven't really seen them preparing for House of the Dragon at all. Granted, there's only been 2 teaser trailers. So... do you see news sites actually preparing for House of the Dragon, reporting on it as much as like the House of the Dragon subreddit crowd, of which I'm a minor member, and I'm not one of the big movers and shakers, but I ask questions, and I try to report on a summary of the findings in my YouTube channel, and people seem to like it. But I'm around there, I'm at least discussing it with people, I'm not one of the big ones there, but I think it's polite to ask, oh, what do you think? Oh, that's the report you had, what did it look like? Anyone can do that. I see a grassroots level swell of fans interested in this, like people on Reddit and Twitter and the Twitter channels, like the Brazilian fan channels, the Arabic fan channels, the Greek language ones, are doing a better job of reporting on this than allegedly like professional news sites just plain don't feel like reporting on House of the Dragon. And I think the answer is, I've been saying this for years, we need better news sites. And we haven't really had like a new fan site in like a decade of just, why do we keep getting stuck with this? And it's no one person. They just don't care. They don't anticipate it like we do. So I hope you can respond to all these thoughts in the comments. I'm going to read through all of them. Thank you.